Welcome, ladies and gentlemen of the board, and thank you for making time to hear this presentation about using the flipped classroom to reduce the amount of DNFs in the classroom setting. Now, just to kind of give you some broad figures here, the most recent information that we have with DNFs at the high school was given to us this past week, and as of now, we have 90 freshmen. Now, some of these are repeat students as well, but 90 DNFs at the freshman level. 63 DNFs at the sophomore level, 49 at the junior level, and 26 Ds and Fs at the senior level. So you can see this is a huge issue, ladies and gentlemen, in the secondary institution. Now, before we start here, let's take a look at our modern learner, because a lot of these students come to us and they have different backgrounds, obviously. And so the whole nature of this is kind of increasing the efficiency and controlling what we can control as instructors at the high school level. So breaking down the modern learner, we see that the majority of these students that come to us are very heavily engaged with media. Okay, some basic statistics, 6 hours roughly of media per day. That's broken down between television, music, anything that's kind of non-related to school. And 26% of our kids, a quarter, are able to kind of multitask using 2 different forms of media simultaneously. Now, this kind of contradicts students that come into our classroom because they're kind of ushered into a new environment, one that they have to sit down and kind of go back in time, if you will, to not really embrace learning with this comprehension of the world that they have today. So, understanding this, we're trying to make a case that technology and media is a vital aspect in student success. Now, one of the major questions that arises when we start this discussion is access. You know, are they going to have access inside school, outside school, and so on and so forth? And the most recent figures that are available to the public was a test that was kind of conducted by the kids in social media. It was an impact study. And as you can see on my screen here, that kids and families largely have access to a lot of internet-capable devices. And so really the kids that we're looking at that don't have very much access, that is significantly limited. So the laptop computer, we're looking at 81%, a desktop 80%, with smartphones and tablets, you know, we're looking at the vast majority of our kids. And the ones that don't have access, we can take the content that is presented in this format and burn it to DVDs, CDs, whatever they have available, or make time within the school day itself. I'll get into that here in a little while, a little bit different. But our concern shouldn't be for the majority of students, as noted by this infographic. Now, looking at this graphic came from a different study that looked at the average usage of technology and media in teenagers from 8 to 18. I want to get your attention here to the right side here, and it is highlighted in red. It has a breakdown basically of students that are heavy, moderate, and light users of technology and the correlation with their grades. And statistically, looking at the correlation, those that are heavy media users contribute the majority of lower or poor grades in the classroom setting, which isn't really a surprise. You know, their attention is elsewhere instead of the academic environment outside of school, and there's no continuity, if you will, from school to home and so on and so forth. So it is an issue that is relevant. Now, what we're looking to do, ladies and gentlemen, is to go through a shift in pedagogy in traditional instruction. So what we're looking at doing is introducing what we call the flipped environment, where essentially students have the instructor in some format, whether that be pre-recorded on a YouTube video or in a DVD or whatever it may be, and they're able to watch that lecture, traditional lecture, at home, and they can stop, pause, rewind the instructor to go through some of these tough concepts, because let's face it, when they go home, it's difficult to remember everything that was presented in class. But in this format, they have that luxury. And then when they come to school, we can work with applying those skills in a setting that they can reinforce their knowledge and comprehension application of such. What we see is a transition from the teacher being the center of the learning environment to that of the student taking more of an autonomous role within the learning environment. And this will also free up the teacher to work individually with a lot more students as well, and really not allow any student to hide or fall through the cracks as much as what they do in the traditional model as well. Now, if I can draw your attention to this infographic that we have here, it's going to essentially kind of reiterate what I said just a moment ago about transitioning lecture and kind of the sit and get method to more of a modern approach that I think a lot of our kids would benefit from, especially those that may have a lower attention span, because the world that they live in moves a lot faster than what traditional education does. So what does a traditional classroom, what does a flipped classroom look like? If we take a look at the comparison here, essentially what we're doing in the flipped classroom is we have a warm-up activity. Typically this could be something kind of revisit the content that we talked about in the lecture. This is also an opportunity for students that didn't have access or time to access the lecture. Now they can go back and revisit that in a station that you may have set up in your classroom. Following this, those students can already join the question and answer session that's in progress. So therefore, students have questions, and I'll go into the nature of what they should do to ask questions here in just a moment. But they can ask specific questions and they can get specific answers. And so it really is student-driven with the questions that are asked in class. And that frees up probably in a normal block schedule about 75 minutes or more than an hour worth of time to kind of apply these skills and allow the students to problem solve and work through these issues that they have, so that they can leave that day really understanding what the content is and how it is applied correctly. Now, accountability becomes an issue with this. Anytime you require your homework to just watch a video, you know. So what we do in the flipped classroom model is we introduce what we call the Cornell note-taking method. That's one example that you can use. I prefer it. And what you do in that setting is you change the way that students take notes. So you give them essentially everything with a lecture, and I personally upload my PowerPoint so students can access those. And then what they're able to do is have access to absolutely everything that's presented in class. But now we work on going to that next level of understanding and synthesizing some of this information. And the Cornell method allows students to do that because they summarize the notes, and then they have to transition the notes into essential questions, and then lastly summarize their information. And that's where a teacher in the flip model can introduce a question or something like that to kind of target what was given in the notes. And so it really limits and gets rid of the regurgitation of information and knowledge, and more of the application. Now, what stuck out to me as I kind of looked at the what teachers are competing with in the modern world is we are competing with games, smartphones, television, music streaming, social media, all kinds of forms of technology. So for education to not parallel this use, I think, is kind of missing the bandwagon, especially since the vast majority of media consumption per week is on the rise, with an estimated 80% of all media, digital media, being presented in that format by 2020, which is 7 short years away. So essentially what we get down to is that I think students, when they come to the traditional model, they seem very frustrated with traditional education. And in fact, an impact study noted that 60% of heavy media users are often bored at school because of the snail pace that they assume. So, as we kind of gear instruction toward the 21st century, we need students that are able to successfully employ 21st century skills, including lifelong study abilities, positive work habits, and some of these other 21st century relevant skills in the classroom. So what does the flipped solution provide? It reduces lecture. Usually it's reduced to about 10 to 15 minutes. Class time is used for active learning strategies that really concentrate on comprehension and application of content knowledge. Students develop their time management skills by taking kind of a more autonomous role within the classroom. And you really create a collaborative environment for students to work with their students, but also students to work with the teacher as well, on specific problems, instead of just a broad overview. Now, as this is applied to the process that learning takes place, we can see with this graphic that I have up here that the vast majority of learning that takes place in the flipped environment is going to highlight and target the broad spectrum of the process. So as you can see in note, every check mark here indicates what is being provided in the flipped model. Now, obviously there are pros and cons to the flipped model. You can take a look at this and see that the pros, we really kind of engage the modern learner. We're really trying to reduce the boredom or the frustration that sets in at school by putting the student in the driver's seat and then allowing the teacher to help out where they can. Helps people, especially students that are busy and active in a secondary setting. Self-pacing is evident. Really kind of the biggest issue is educating parents and the community about what you're doing, because it is a shift in pedagogy. And the list kind of goes on and on as well. Now, taking a look at who's flipping, this was a 2012 study that was done with 453 teachers that have jumped on board to this movement. And what we essentially see with this is that 67% of these students, of these teachers, have seen improvements in test scores. 80% have seen an increase in student attitudes towards learning. And who are the flippers? 85% of the flippers have taught for 7 years or more. 91 have used it for less than 2 years, and 95 are secondary teachers. So we can see that this is a newer movement, if you will, and that the data is slowly being conducted, but the data that is coming back is extremely promising. Now, some of the data that we do have comes to us from Clinton High School in Clinton, Michigan. They are a flipped school, and so a lot of their curriculum is presented in this manner, vast majority. And what they've seen with failure rates is an overall decrease from 30% to 11%, and then subsequent reduction of failures also happen within each core content. English 52% to 19% failure rates, social studies 28 to 9, math 44 to 13, and science 41 to 19%. Now, in a more local application, I'm looking to use this in my Ancient Civ class initially, and then expand out to the rest of the classes that I teach. And here are some current figures that I have from the 2011-12 and the 2012 and 13 school years. And you can see the amount of students that were on the D and F list is substantial, and it is on the rise as well. So I really want to combat this. I find this to be a very relevant issue. Now, looking at the cost analysis, students that fail a course, according to a study that was conducted by Revolutionizing Education Through Technology, the average retake is about just under $1,500 per student. And often these students are subject to higher dropout rates because of their increased frustration in the classroom. In addition, that same study noted that there was a 92% reduction in disciplinary action and an 89% reduction in dropout rates. In terms of other cost analysis, the digital content that would be introduced in this manner, we would see kind of a reduction in textbook demand by using free resources online, but overall a reduced per pupil expenditure would drop from $79 per student to $19 per student, according to the same study that I've noted before. And here are some of the free resources that are available if we're going to pursue this at no cost to the district, potentially. screencast